in the newspaper. Now, this is unsubstantiated. I want you to have the opportunity to respond to it. This is from July 15, 2003, Night Rider newspapers. In a new dispute over interpreting intelligence data, the CIA and other agencies objected vigorously to a Bush administration assessment of the threat of Syria's weapons of mass destruction that was to be presented Tuesday on Capitol Hill. After the objections, the planned testimony by Undersecretary of State John R. Bolton, a leading administration hawk, was delayed until September. U.S. officials told Night Rider that Bolton was prepared to tell members of the House of Representatives International Relations Subcommittee that Syria's development of biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons had progressed to such a point that they posed a threat to stability in the region. The CIA and other intelligence agencies said that assessment was exaggerated. And then further down it says, Bolton's planned remarks caused a, quote, revolt among intelligence experts who thought they inflated the progress Syria has made in its weapons program, said a U.S. official who isn't from the CIA, but was involved in the dispute. Now, first of all, this is unsubstantiated, so I want to give you a brief opportunity to respond. Be mindful, though, that I know you want to go home. Your poor wife, I'm sure, wants to go home after all this. So if you can keep responses relatively brief.
I was invited to give both classified and unclassified testimony to a subcommittee of the House. Drafts were prepared, and I should say, as is often the case and was in part in the case in other speeches, I hadn't even seen the draft. I'd been traveling. When I came back, I found that I had a conflict. I'd been assigned to go to a deputies committee meeting at the White House. There were a lot of disagreements about the speech. It was clear to me that that more work needed to be done on it. I called Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, and I said, look, I'm going to, on my own hook, I'm going to cancel this. We need more time. Schedules were such that with the August recess, we couldn't reschedule it until September, and that's what was done.
Okay. The reason I say this, I mean, look, let me try to put in context some of the questioning that at least has been coming from this other side of the aisle. My colleague from Minnesota suggested this is a dispute about management style. Let me reiterate, I don't think it's a dispute about management style. What I think is of concern is that to the extent that you have a strong set of opinions, I'd call it an ideology, but I think that is, you know, sort of a loaded term. So let's say you have a strong set of opinions about foreign policy, that you've been on the lecture circuit delivering to the international community as well as to think tanks and et cetera. You're now seeking confirmation to a position of power in which every utterance you make matters. To the extent that there is a pattern in which you are pushing the envelope on your take on the world and seeking to have intelligence matters conform to your views, then we agreed this morning that that is not good for America's national security. There are two instances that we know of in which, although you say that you did not want to have these people fired, it seems to me that we're playing semantics here, because you did suggest that they be redeployed. I mean, the proverbial station them in Antarctica. There are at least two circumstances in which a dispute, now you say that it was about process, but what appears from the record is that they did not breach any process. They just didn't do it exactly the way you wanted, partly because it seems as if there was a substantive disagreement and you felt that they were challenging your substantive assessments. You now have an article here in which, at least, again, I haven't interviewed these people personally, but there is substantial evidence indicating that perhaps you had a more aggressive view about Syria's capabilities and that the CIA had to rein you in. There are examples with respect to Libya in which you make statements saying the reason that Libya gave up its MWD program, WMD program, was because of the tough actions in Iraq, although there are assessments that would indicate that, in fact, diplomacy served a critical function in that regard. Although you say you don't do carrots, actually it turns out that there were some carrots applied there that made a difference. And so the concern, I think, that I have, I'm all for UN reform, but I'm also making sure that we have sufficient credibility in the world that when our troops are deployed around the world, that they've got support, and that when we are spending enormous sums to bring about some semblance of order in disruptive areas of the world, that we've got other people also willing to pick up some of the tab. And that, it strikes me, would be an important function that you would play as this permanent representative to the United Nations. Now, I know that was a mouthful, and I apologize for that. You know, this is one of the problems with, you know, you're sitting here for 3 hours, you think all kinds of things to say.
I've thought of a few things, too.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. That's what I figured. It's a good, and I think you're probably wise not to have uttered all the things you were thinking about during the course of this
They were much more learned than that.
Yeah. So let me just go to this particular point. Moving forward, with respect to assessments of threats in Syria, or North Korea, or Iran, we can't afford to cry wolf. We've got to be able to, when we say that there's a threat, people have to believe us. Am I wrong to think that this kind of potential overstating after what happened in Iraq, after Colin Powell's presentation before the United Nations, et cetera, may hamper our ability to protect our national security?
Well, I think, Senator, the test is what language is finally approved. In the case of the Syria speech, it needed a lot of work. It wasn't ready. And one of the consequences of the clearance process is to take drafts and turn them into an acceptable final product. And as I say, I saw that there was a lot of disagreement, both in the classified and the unclassified version. We had a small problem, and we were proposing to tell the House International Relations Committee Intelligence that had not been briefed to the House Intelligence Committee and Senate Committee. That was a problem. But the speech wasn't ready, and I put it off. And I think it was the right thing to do, and I think that the final product, the speech, the testimony, the unclassified testimony and the classified testimony that I finally gave was broadly accepted. And that's part of, that's inherent in the nature of government. And I think it can be frustrating, to say the least, but it's a necessary process, and I have submitted to it throughout my tenure in this job. And I think
although in at least 2 circumstances, you were unhappy with it to the effect that you might have been taking it out on somebody else.
No.
Let me just make this point, and you know, I don't mean to cut you off here. I'm assuming I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman. Poor Mr. Chairman.